Hello, everybody. It's Dusty Sage, and
Chloe Ferreira.
it has been a long time since we've been with you here, but we have some, well, kind of big news to talk about, don't we, Chloe?
We do all about Splash Mountain at Disneyland. I know closed today.
Yeah.
And
And,
then
and Tiana's Bayou adventure coming up soon, depending on
mhm.
what you think of as soon. And we'll talk about all of that on the show today because it really is sort of the end of an era that the two Splash Mountain attractions have now closed at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. And there were epic lines, Chloe, at Disneyland on the 30th. We had up to 4 hour waits to get into the attraction. Plus, there was lightning lane and DAS for people, with disability assistance and single riders. So they were running four different lines for that one attraction. And there was
Wow.
even some sort of an emergency at one point where someone had a panic attack and jumped out of a log, causing the whole ride to shut down. So it was chaos. So when Nathan and I rode, we got off and there was security everywhere. And Nathan said, "They've come to get you, Dusty. They have finally come to get you." But it wasn't for me. It was for that incident that had happened while we were waiting in queue.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yes, wildness ensued. Your ride shut down a while ago, didn't it?
Yeah, January 23rd, I believe, of this year. And it also closed to massive lines and people picking up on the merchandise they could. I mean, the moment that they announced that Splash Mountain was closing on both coasts, the merchandise here was flying off the shelves to those pesky eBay resellers.
You
But
know, it's interesting, Chloe. There was no farewell merchandise, none. They didn't do a T-shirt saying, "I rode the last splash" or "I took the last splash" or nothing like that.
yeah.
On the last day at Disneyland, there's not one stitch of merchandise available for months here, but they did have a penny press machine. So that was the one item, and there were at least 150 people waiting in the penny press machine line for a penny.
hmm You have the cute little penny press, the one that goes down the little flume, right?
Yeah, it looks
The
like
cute.
the penny is sliding down Splash Mountain. It's very
It's so
adorable.
cute. I love
Yeah,
it. I hope that stays because I mean the structure, I guess they could change it and update it for Tiana's Bayou Adventure, but that's
turn
one of
it
the
into a
little
salt mine. Yeah.
yeah,
we'll,
that's one of
we'll
the
talk
little
about
details of
that, folks.
Disneyland I
You
love.
don't know
But
about the salt mine, but we'll tell you all about the salt mine that's coming up for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. But why don't we shift gears here a little bit? Splash Mountain, of course, historic, been around since '89. Disneyland, the iconic Tony Baxter, everyone's favorite Imagineer, took some characters from the old closed America Sings attraction in Tomorrowland, which was an old Mark Davis attraction from way back when, and moved them over to Splash Mountain so that they wouldn't be discarded and turned them into the critters that we saw in the bayou. And so the attraction has a long history, even before it became Splash Mountain. We did see Tony Baxter at the park for the last ride, and he had little vials filled with water from the flume. So he collected flume water, which we assume he is not going to be selling on eBay. We saw some vials for
incredible.
$100 and more going on eBay. Folks, don't buy water out of a flume. you know, it's just water. But there's big things afoot. And last week, I got to spend 3 days in New Orleans with the
Wow.
Imagineers working on the upcoming Tiana's Bayou Adventure attraction. And I thought we could take some time, Chloe, to kind of go through it and see what I learned and a whole lot about the background of the attraction, their research project process, which is just unbelievable because they've spent years working on this attraction and new things that we discovered. I will say up front, folks, there is not a lot of new news other than the process by which they came to their storyline that they have decided on. And I can explain that storyline a little bit better. So, why don't we get going on that? And I think we'll just, if you don't mind, we'll just start off with a very basic overview of really what this attraction is. And the
Mhm.
storyline is completely 100% different than the old Splash Mountain. So the first thing that everybody wants to know is, are they changing the ride mechanism? And they aren't. It's the same layout, same drop that everybody knows. So that is not changing. So the part where you go down and where the bees are and the little dip in the dark and you get soaking wet, all of that is the same layout that it was before, including the big drop at the end. But everything on the inside, all of the characters and scenes, that is all being changed. And they've spent so much time coming up with story details. I really do think that every inch of it is going to be practically new. Before we thought, oh, they could pretty much just leave it like it is and swap the new characters in and change out the music and it would really fit. And I don't know, what are your thought on that, Chloe? But I think it would have fit had they just taken the music and the characters from the Princess and the Frog film and shoehorned them into Splash. It would have been an easy
Oh,
overlay.
absolutely. And I think everybody kind of pictured, as they climb the drop, it has Dr. Facilier
Are
singing
you
his song
ready?
Friends on the Other Side. Are you
Yeah.
ready? Yeah. And I don't know, I'm kind of hesitant that they're not going with that because everybody loves that moment and it could have been so cool. But I mean, I have faith in the Imagineers, and especially it sounds like they're really putting a lot of research into this. I can't wait to hear more about your trip and what they're studying and everything, because I feel like it's been a while since we've heard of Imagineering really digging deep, so to speak, and going to, find the roots of something that they're building at a park. That just makes me think of Joe Rohde doing all of his trips for Animal Kingdom and Expedition Everest and
Yep.
whatnot. So I can't wait to hear more. But I'm a little scared also. Should I
Yeah.
be scared?
Well, no, well, I was until I went on this
Yeah,
trip, and I'll tell you, I'm not anymore. I'm not worried at all. I think that they have the most incredible team working on this, and they were willing to listen to the concerns and, why are you talking about this and that? The fans aren't crazy about it. They were excited at
yeah.
first and now they're not. And they're like, folks, we can only tell you so much, but you're going to love it. And I got to hear some of that love it. So we'll get into that. And I think we'll just start with the basics of this. They have decided to set Tiana's Bayou Adventure after the film. So it's sort of a sequel to the film, but there is
Hmm.
also a series coming up on Disney Plus themed to Princess and the Frog, and it all sort of ties in. So it's all based on that original movie, but there are characters who died in that movie. So the lightning bug, he died, and Dr. Facilier got called to hell. We assume the friends from the other side got him, but that doesn't mean that elements from that movie won't be in the attraction. And a lot of the music that we loved from the movie has been updated for this attraction. So we'll hear the themes from the movie in the ride, maybe with different lyrics or slightly updated to match some of the other new music, because they did hire somebody to write an all new, catchy tune. He's a New Orleans jazz musician. We'll talk about PJ here in a second. And he's created a song, and his task was to make it as catchy as the tune from Pirates of the Caribbean or Small World or
Wow.
Haunted Mansion. So something
Some
you
big
might
shoes
leave the
to fill.
attraction sort of humming, but which also sounds like both Princess and the Frog and New Orleans in general. So all the people they've hired to work on things like music are all from the New Orleans area, including some of the artists. So it's they kept saying over and over, they wanted it to be authentic. They wanted it to be authentic. And that is one thing it will be. It'll be very authentic to the feeling of New Orleans, which we have a lot of at Disneyland. And Chloe, there's no New Orleans in the Magic Kingdom in Florida.
Yeah. What's going on with that? Did you hear anything about that? Because
No, I must have
I've got
asked a
some
million
ideas.
questions about, in kind of secretive sort of ways to get them to either confirm or deny that there would be some sort of expansion. Because at Disneyland, they've expanded the storytelling of Tiana to include Eudora's Chic Boutique in New Orleans
Hmm.
Square. So we have a new shop. And we have Tiana's Palace restaurant coming where the French market used to be. So we
Hmm.
have these two Tiana story element rides and shops that are being added, plus the attraction, and then plus at the exit, they will no doubt swap out the current gift shop with something, a little closer to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. So we'll have all of this New Orleans, Tiana,
Makes
Bayou
sense.
stuff
It
going
fits.
on. Right. But
Mm-hmm.
what about in Florida? Well, the
Mm-hmm.
obvious thing, and they did not confirm this, folks, but just I think we can just assume that that giant gift shop complex behind the ride. So when you exit the ride, there's a restroom and a big shop. That that entire courtyard area after you go under the train tracks will all be New Orleans esque for the ride. So whether it's more Bayou themed or New Orleans themed, I think you can assume that that whole area will get reworked to fit in perfectly with the ride. Um, if they extend it further than that, I don't know that they really could. You have Big Thunder right there, and it's a long stretch before you get to the next closest thing, which would be Frontierland. So I don't expect that that down there is going to really significantly change, but you never know. So we will keep our ear to the ground on that. What would you like to see happen?
I mean, I've seen some rumored stuff and it's got some traction, but of course nothing's official. But I would like them to, because our Frontierland here is not very it's just that stretch of shops and restaurants, that one side against the lagoon, and then there's Splash and then there's Thunder. And if we ever get that what's beyond Big Thunder, I think Thunder Mountain would kind of be grouped into whatever that is going to be it Villains or Encanto, whatever they're doing. I'd love it for it to just be Villains, please. And then from Splash through all the way up to basically Liberty Square would be transformed into a New Orleans area, because they could transform Pecos Bills, they could change over all the general store, whatnot, and make that its own New Orleans area.
Mm.
Um, and then Country Bears would just kind of be in the theater still, but kind of change the facade. That's what I've heard. I don't know how this would actually work. I would like them to kind of update Frontierland, because I was walking through it the other day and it does feel kind of stale in that area. And I don't know, I don't really, and Pecos Bills is not my favorite food place either, my favorite dining location. So I would like to see some TLC infused into it, and whether that means, keeping it Frontierland or making it fit the theme to Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which makes sense. That's what I'd like to see is some updates over there.
It could fit. Tiana's Bayou Adventure is set in the well, the original movie was set in the 1920s. So the
Hmm.
part where the story picks up is a little closer to the 30s. And that is sort of a frontier-ish time period in a way. So depending on how they did it, if they made it a little more backwater bayou looking, it wouldn't be that far off from what Frontierland is. So we'll have to see what
Hmm.
they do. When I asked about it, they kind of laughed it off. But that doesn't mean anything with Imagineering, so you never know.
That means they want
But
to keep their mouths shut
yeah,
for
it
now.
definitely does. But they've announced so much of what's coming to Disneyland, and Disneyland started our construction a long time after Florida did. So you would think that by now we would know a little bit more,
Right, right.
especially since your attraction will be opening in summer of next year, and we won't be opening at Disneyland until fall or winter of next year.
Oh,
So
wow.
at least 3 or 4 months after Florida. So
Yeah.
if we're already working on the new shops and restaurants and Florida hasn't started, it's not a good sign for Florida that there'll be significant changes too far away from the
Yeah.
attraction. Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
we also know they like to work in phases though too. So maybe it's coming later
yeah, for
along
sure.
with something else. So we'll
Well,
see.
one thing we do know about the news story is that Tiana did, in fact, get to open up her restaurant. She became so successful, Chloe, that she has now got her own food franchise, Tiana's Foods, and it
Naturally.
she has taken over for some reason an old salt mine somewhere
Okay.
out near the bayou. And there are, in fact, real salt mines in that area of Louisiana. So we were able to see some old research. They even found an old salt mine that had a water tower, not unlike the one that's going to be right in front of the ride. So there are a lot of elements that they went searching through the archives of the history museums there in New Orleans to find a way to disguise the mountain, which is a show building, folks. So the whole reason there's a mountain there is to hide a gigantic show building so you don't see it from inside the park. And since that mountain already fits the kind of look and feel of a Bayou, Briar Patch, all that stuff was sort of the same. What could they do to really make it fit? And all they had to do was shave the tree stump off the top, which is sad, Chloe, because some of the early concept art did show a tree up there with Mama Odie's boat in it, and that would have
Right.
been sort of
That
perfect.
looks great.
It
Yeah.
does.
I'm
And
surprised
Mama
they,
Odie is a pivotal character in the new story. She is sort of the inspiration or the inflection point of magic in the story. So, for those of you who are worried that all of this talk of Tiana's foods and things is going to be what the ride is about, and that you're somehow just floating through Tiana's shop, that is not the story. So that is sort of the setup in the queue. You get into the queue, you're in Tiana's shop, you're going to hear music from an old radio program on an old vintage 1930s
oh,
radio. At some point,
sounds
you
very Jungle
hear
Cruise. I
it
like
is
that.
very Jungle Cruise. In between the musical segments and the announcer talking, you hear that Tiana's asked for some help. She needs everyone to come on down to Tiana's Foods. She's getting ready for a big Mardi Gras celebration. She needs some help. And they've talked a lot about that help she needs is that she's needs help finding a missing ingredient. But one of the Imagineers told me after I pressed and pressed and pressed and said, ingredients, ingredients, why do you keep talking about ingredients? And the Imagineer said, now, Dusty, an ingredient doesn't always mean food, which has me thinking the missing ingredient is something like magic or people or you. So that
Oh
missing
my.
ingredient is a little deeper than just an actual ingredient. So they want you maybe to think that, and then you get into the ride, and I think it all has something to do with Mama Odie.
A
That's
frog.
unconfirmed, folks. It could be a frog. We might all be turned into frogs. uh, so I am, a little more excited about that. And so we talked about the characters that definitely won't be in this ride. The dead characters from the movie, gone, folks.
hmm
They did. But there are some characters that everyone loves that we know will be in the ride. Tiana is going to be in the ride. She is not a frog. Uh, Prince Naveen will be in the ride, also not a frog. Both of them are sort of represented at the beginning parts of the ride, just as regular folks who are working a shop and restaurant and doing their thing. But I have a feeling that by the end, we'll get to see them in their regal form. Prince Naveen's mother from, what was that country called? They were from Moldonia or something like that. It was a,
Maldonia.
yeah,
Yeah.
fake country. So Naveen's mother, the Queen of Moldonia, she'll be in the attraction, and so will Naveen's little brother. And he is a
Mm.
jazz loving little boy, and he's got an old drum set that is a replica of one that I got to see in one of the museums there in New Orleans. So they have replicated that radio from one they found in the museum. So it's an actual old radio from New Orleans in the 30s. Same thing with this drum set. It was in the curator's office, and the Imagineers went in to meet him, and they said, "That's what we've been looking for." It was right there, like just kismet. So they've recreated all of these like authentic things that we're going to see. Where we're going to see them, not exactly sure if it's in the queue somewhere or if it's in the ride, but jazz music is really what kind of sets this ride into motion. So it's an incredibly musical, music heavy, jazzy Zydeco. And for those of you who don't know what Zydeco is, look it up right now so that you can listen to some Zydeco music because it has that Cajun jazz upbeat kind of sound to it that would be just
Mardi
perfect.
Gras.
Yes, perfect for
hmm
a ride to get your blood pumping and moving. So I'm really excited about that part of it. And one other thing we learned a while ago, there will be a lot of new critters in the attraction. So aside from the characters we know and love, and Louis the alligator, the jazz singing alligator from the movie will be in the ride, voiced by Michael Leon Woolley, who was the original artist in the movie and a good friend of mine. And all the other characters will be voiced by their original actors from the movie. But there's all these new characters, and it's a whole host of critters. And they did
Oh.
use that term with me when I talked to somebody. They said, "Oh, yeah, there's plenty of critters in the ride." Now that's important because at Disneyland, where is the attraction located?
Critter Country.
That is right. So I think that, I mean, it's possible they could still change the name, like Critter Bayou or something like that, but Winnie the Pooh is still in the land. So I think keeping it Critter Country still works. It
It's a
takes
little
place
of
out.
both.
Yeah, it takes place out in a bayou. The attraction is going to be filled with critters. So I think it still might work. We'll see what happens on that front. But there are also, Chloe, tons and tons of fireflies. And it was
Ooh.
explained that they're using a new kind of lighting and technology technique to have the fireflies sort of light our path through the bayou as we're
Oh,
going
I
down the
love
bayou.
that.
Yes, the fireflies are going to be kind of lighting a path, and then you'll get to Mama Odie, and then she makes some magic happen. She's even kind of laughing along with you as you float past her. So they really, I think, are setting us up for a big adventure. And that makes me very happy. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of additional information beyond kind of that point with Mama Odie. So
Hmm.
we can assume we make it to our big Mardi Gras celebration. I assume that happens where the riverboat is now. And who knows, that riverboat might even still be there, would certainly fit a Mardi Gras scene. And when I asked, there's this long tradition of Imagineering recycling things from older attractions. Tony Baxter did it with the America Sings characters, brought them to Splash Mountain to save them. Would we maybe see some of those characters or other elements, maybe the riverboat in the new attraction? And they just said, we want to save those things for you to discover and be delighted by yourself. So oh,
Uh-huh.
killer, right? Like I even
Yeah.
said, I mean, I think that I answered that in front of some other bloggers and influencers, and I told the Imagineer, "You're killing me," because it really is. That's the sort of thing I have to know right now. So I don't know. What else do you want to know about the attraction, Miss Chloe?
Hmm. Um, my goodness. You didn't get to hear any of the music, right? It was just kind of what it's influenced by.
Yeah, so I thought that we were going to hear the music, and they sort of set us up to believe we were going to. And then at the
Hmm.
last minute, they didn't. And I don't know if that was always the plan or not, but I have a feeling it's because they're still recording it, and they did mention that they were. But I'm just going to give you some names of here of the musicians that are working on the music. And we were able to talk to PJ Martin, who is writing the new song for the attraction. He's
Hmm.
the kind of the theme song of the attraction, but he's also rewriting the lyrics and kind of recomposing original music from the movie to fit the ride. So he said there were certain things. He said he listened to a song from the original movie and he said, "Oh, well, that has to be in this ride. I mean, that would fit perfectly here." And when he said that, in my head, I could think of like two or three songs where, yeah, you could just lift them and plop them into the ride and they would fit perfectly. And the fact that he listened to all the music from the movie and in his head knew that some of it just like, oh, we got to use that, makes me comfortable that that is what they're doing and they're rewriting things where they need to make it fit. And that new music for probably the beginning and end of the ride where Mardi Gras happens or whatever. So I'm very comfortable. PJ talked to us two different times throughout the 3 days. He is a delight, incredibly well known in New Orleans, a true talent. So I'm very comfortable hearing, that he is involved. And there's another gentleman named Terrence Blanchard, and he's writing the music for the queue. They're really kind of treating it like two separate experiences, which has me thinking that the queue is much more of Tiana's Foods. And then
Mm.
what PJ is doing is more about the ride and the adventure. So you're setting up to go out on an adventure and then you go on it. And I'll give you all an example. So we arrived and had a little bit of breakfast with the Imagineers, and they said they wanted to take us somewhere. So we got on these big buses and went off and drove forever. And we drove down to a bayou, and we got on these boats, and we're out in the middle of nowhere. And at one point, we're floating through, and there's these big trees with the Spanish moss dripping down, and all of these plants growing. It looked like the Jungle Cruise almost, giant elephant ears and cattails, and even water lilies. and he turns off the motor and he says, just be quiet. He says, just be as quiet still as you can and just listen. And we could hear the sound of frogs and sounded like
Oh.
crickets. And all of a sudden, I noticed there was this dragonfly just kind of hovering in the boat and flying off, all
Hmm.
iridescent. And then we saw these alligators just swimming up towards our boat. Like they were coming from all directions. It was almost
Oh my
terrifying.
goodness.
And he's like, just don't
Yeah.
put your hand out, like they're not gonna jump in the
Okay.
boat. But it just suddenly we were in the middle of nature, and I felt like that is sort of like what they wanted us to experience going out there in
Hmm.
this bayou, and how exciting it was to be surrounded by nature and hear these sounds. And he said, sometimes if you listen, you'll hear this thing croaking and then another thing croaks and you'll hear the bird, and it's almost like this symphony. And I got it. So we'll have a real
Yeah.
symphony of music from the movie, but along with the animal sounds and the lightning bugs and this story element. And I'm getting really excited for it. So
Yeah, that sounds
yeah,
great.
a lot of neat modern technology to add to that kind of aging attraction. So I
Hmm.
think we'll be in pretty good hands. I do wish they would stop talking about salt mines and co-ops and the mechanisms of Tiana. Tiana's employees are part owners of the co-op that runs Tiana's foods. And I think all of that is too much backstory. Like we could learn that after the
Mm.
ride opens. Just
Yeah.
focus on the stuff that people want to hear, which is that this is going to be an exciting thrill ride through part of New Orleans and a bayou as we go on this grand adventure to seek the secret ingredient, whatever that is, because I don't think it's an ingredient, folks. I think it's something magical. And that's what we're in search of. And we find it at the end, and it results in this big celebration. I think that's what's going to happen. But I will say that the adventure I was on was a lot more about the research of it all
Yeah.
than it was really about the story. And I wish I'd learned more about the story. I know about Ralphie, Prince Naveen's brother, that he likes music and all that. But really, the things we learned were that they spent months at the Jazz Museum. They spent months at a couple of other museums and research institutions. They spent a lot of time at this art academy called Yaya, that takes in young kids all the way up until they're 25, I think from like 10 until 25. And they teach them the arts and they provide them with the resources to do amazing things. And not just like paint, but glass blowing with these giant kilns and pottery and making masks and clothing and like just about anything you can imagine these kids are taught to do. And one of the things they did at the Yaya Academy from its earliest iterations when it was first founded is they would find old broken furniture by the side of the road or in landfills. They'd bring it back and fix it and then paint it in really fanciful ways and then sell them to make money for the Yaya Institute. And Imagineering was so taken by this and by one young lady that was teaching there that was a former Yaya student herself that they hired her to produce 4 paintings for Imagineering. And they told her the entire story for the attraction. And because she's a Louisiana, New Orleans native and really knows the city and its flavor, she advised them on like what needed to be kind of changed or adapted or what sounded right, what didn't sound right. And then they had her recreate in her mind what these scenes would look like. And they even tried to not give her too many details because they wanted her to use her creativity so they could be inspired by her rather than her being inspired by them. And
Hmm.
she did some beautiful pieces of frogs in the bayou and of Mama Odie, and of a scene with Eudora, Tiana's mom, and Tiana sitting on a couch. And some really lovely things she did. And we'll have those photos for everybody in an article on MiceChat about the new ride. So, go to micechat.com and search Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and you'll see our article with all the information that we're talking about, plus concept art and things, including from this incredible artist. And those are the kinds of things that really made me feel like for what is it, about 9 minutes at Disneyland, maybe 12 minutes at Magic Kingdom ride,
Hmm.
they're packing in so much more history and flavor and authenticity than a guest is going to be able to pick up on. And I
Right.
think that's okay because for the Imagineers, it was important for them to be in the moment and really be living in Tiana's world as much as they could as they design it. In fact, while we were there, they were already there. They were on a research trip, and the Imagineers were popping in and out, while we were going to various things, and they'd pop in for dinner or this or that or a panel, one of them or two, and they were working, and they have been working there for 2 years and just
Wow.
immersing themselves in the music, the stories, the newspaper clippings. In fact, they clipped all of these old ads and newspaper stories from the period that Tiana was living, the storyline. And you'll see those elements in the queue in particular. So they're recreating or using versions of that, but telling the story of the ride. And so much so that whole newspapers and things are being created that you may not even notice as you walk through the queue. So
Oh,
not since
interesting.
Indiana Jones, when Tony Baxter did that attraction, has there been sort of that level of detail. There's Indy's office that you walk
Yeah.
right by in that caged off room, and it's
The
just
Jungle
filled with
Cruise.
things, yeah, that are just
Hmm.
filled with things that are all accurate to the story and the period that guests would never stop and see. Jungle Cruise queue at Disneyland, another example of that, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I
It's
think
very
that's what they're
reassuring.
doing. Yeah,
It's
it
very
is.
reassuring. And I mean, it just sounds like there's going to be layers upon layers of research that they've done brought into the details that they bring into the new attraction, which not only adds to anybody's initial experience with it, but it really adds to rewritability and you're able to experience it and maybe find something new each time. And I feel like that's what makes a Disney difference in a lot of their attractions is, was that their last time or did I just notice they just add that kind of, discovering something each time that you experience an attraction. So that's really exciting. I'm really happy that you got to take all that in and it's very reassuring for the new attraction for
Yeah,
sure.
we got to do another neat thing, and we ate at a restaurant called Dookie Chase, which is a very
Mm,
historic old restaurant in New Orleans, and it really serves kind of a historical lesson in a way. It was founded way back when New Orleans was still segregated, and African Americans were not allowed to eat in the same restaurants as white people, and the Chase family wanted an elegant dining institution for black families to dine in, and they created this beautiful restaurant with amazing authentic New Orleans food. And then over the years, as the city became integrated, it just became popular with everyone because it was great food. But one of the proprietors that was most well known was Leah Chase, and she was considered the queen of New Orleans. Everywhere she
hmm.
went, the crowds just sort of parted for her. In fact, it's still that way for her daughter, who I got to meet at the event. She's just a lovely lady. But Leah Chase was one of the inspirations for Tiana. And we got to hear the story from Leah Chase's daughter about how her mother sort of was Tiana and from that period. And it really was, one of those eye opening moments where things start connecting in your head about how characters are based on things from real life. And there's this real life woman who inspired elements of the story in Princess and the Frog. And we got to be there in her restaurant. So essentially, Tiana's Palace. Go visit if you're in New Orleans, folks. Go to Dookie Chase. It's lovely. And they happen to have Tiana, the character, there at the restaurant for us that day, and she was in her gown, looking lovely. We got to see her again in some of her more adventurer inspired wear later in the trip, but it was really a special moment. And I got to eat the food from New Orleans, and I've never really eaten that kind of Creole type food, but I loved every bit of it. The gumbo and the beignets and the chicken. They had the most amazing fried chicken I think I've ever had in my life.
Hmm.
Uh, it was, I mean, I can't wait to go back to New Orleans. It's a beautiful city, so rich in history, 300 years old. It's older than the United States. It's just it's a treasure. and right there on the Mississippi, right at the delta of the ocean and this great river and the bayous that are down there. And so you have this city, this ancient city, and then you have this rural areas with so much stuff. It really is fodder for an attraction. It really is. And I think Splash Mountain also, similar part of the country, the Briar Patch and the Bayou, all similar idea. I hope that this is going to work because I really want this attraction to be what the Imagineers have been working so hard on.
Mhm.
But you know that sometimes their vision doesn't always connect up with what the fans want. I'm just hoping that once people learn a little bit more about it, they'll give it a chance and wait until they see it for themselves.
I hope so too. I hope so too. It sounds like they're really putting a lot into this, and it can only mean good things, right?
Indeed. So we went to the New Orleans Jazz Museum, which is a gorgeous museum. We walked through the French Quarter, uh, exactly like a gigantic New Orleans Square at Disneyland, Chloe. It's only Disneyland's version's a lot cleaner and the sidewalks aren't broken. But it's a 300-year-old city and they don't have Walt Disney around to keep the place maintained. We went to this place called Preservation Hall, and that's where we got to hear PJ sing. And it's this ancient building, and you walk in and you feel history. It's kind of like going to the old world. You're somewhere in Europe and you're in this ancient old, hundreds-year old building, and it's that when you walk in. And they kind of have this dark room with a stage and artwork on the walls of some of the amazing jazz musicians who have played there over the years. And we got to hear these guys talk about the music coming for the attraction. I wish we got to hear it. They did have a jazz band playing before and after we were there, and they played some music from Princess and the Frog, but not necessarily what's going to be in the ride. But it
Yeah.
was it was amazing to hear, and it really did get me excited. As I'm hearing the music that they picked to play for us, I could imagine going through the ride. And so I
Yeah.
think that they definitely chose that music for us to hear. So, and then again, folks, and I'm just going to be honest. They sent me to New Orleans, so they clearly thought that by getting us there and being immersed in the same kind of environment that they have been immersed in for the last 2 years, that we would be influenced and excited about hearing the news. And there wasn't a lot of news. I mean, just little bits and pieces that I've told you. So a lot of the stories is already out there, but basically we know nothing about this ride. What we know about is how they're researching for it. So keep that in mind. So I'm excited about it because I was just there and immersed in it. Certainly, I'm one of the people that was most vocal with some of the Imagineers. I
Mhm.
sat with Ted, one of the creative designers for the attraction, longtime Imagineer, works on some incredible stuff over the years, and I was very vocal about the fact that the fans seemed to have sort of turned on them a little bit because there was too much talk about missing ingredients and this and that. And he was just quiet and kind of took it all in, talked about it the next day at one of the meetings. They want to hear things. And he said, but what's great is the fans have set a really low expectation for this ride and they're going to be dazzled by it. He said they're going to be so knocked on their butts by what is being delivered and the depth of it and the detail of it and the sound of it and even the smell of it. It smell like a bayou in the bayou. You're going to smell beignets in the queue. They're
Ooh.
really, yeah, they're really pulling it all out.
Mhm.
But really taking in those notes about, what they can share maybe in the upcoming months to get people maybe a little more excited. And now that Splash is closed, we have at least a year until you open in Florida and a year and a quarter, a year and a half before it opens at Disneyland. So a lot of time left for them to share with us still coming up.
Yeah. It's exciting though.
It is exciting. Chloe, any other big news coming out of Florida that we should talk about? Or how does the ride look right now in Florida? Did they
It's
immediately just cover it up?
yeah, I mean you can, the post-drop area is kind of exposed. They immediately drained it, and I mean, I think a week after I was in Magic Kingdom, and there was already workers at the top of the drop and everything, that it was very fast. They're all like, okay, let's go, time to get to work. So I haven't been there too recently, but from what I've seen, they're actively working on it, and most of it, like the ride entrance area and everything, that's all walled off, like near the train station. So
Wow.
yeah,
If you can you ride the train through Splash Mountain still?
yes,
Does
but
it
it
still
is
go
like a
through?
dark tunnel.
Okay, so you
It's
see
just like
nothing.
all blacked off. Yeah, yeah,
You know, my hope is always, folks, that we're going to find that one spot where you can peek in and see the
I
construction, but
know.
I guess there's no hints on this one. Did
Not
they take
yet.
the tree
Hopefully
off the
soon.
top yet?
Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I need to go. I need to
It's
go
time to
soon.
go. Chloe, I need you to put on your
Yeah,
super sleuth hat and your Sherlock Holmes attire and see what you can
yeah.
find for us. But this is one I'm excited about, folks. And I know not everybody feels that way. You know, yesterday when we rode Splash Mountain for the last time, we took everybody live, Chloe. So we were able to go live. You could see Nathan getting soaked because I put him right in front of me. So you see the wall of water come, and then I quickly get behind him, and he takes the entire brunt of the giant wave. It was right there at the front of the log.
Oh
Um,
boy.
but afterwards in the comments, so many people, lamenting that Splash, it's their favorite attraction, it's going away. And I'm just going to say this, give it a chance, folks. Let's see what happens because it really does feel like the ride portion, it's still Splash Mountain, right? You're still floating through a
Hmm.
bayou, you're still splashing down a giant drop. None of that is changing. What's changing is the story and the music, and it's just a little more relevant to kids today that know the Princess and the Frog story and may never have heard of Song of the South. So, um,
Yeah.
like they updated Twilight Zone Tower of Terror to be Guardians of the Galaxy at California Adventure. Do I
Oh,
miss Twilight Zone? Yes. But do I enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy? Absolutely. So I think it's going to be one of those situations where you have almost the same ride, but with a whole new story. And that's what's
right.
going to happen here. I do think it's going to be mostly an entirely new experience, but the same layout and splashability. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for joining me, Miss Chloe. Any
Of
last minute
course.
ideas, questions, or things that you need to mention to the audience?
I don't think so. No, not right now. You've said a lot. You told a lot of stories, and I can't wait to see what this finally becomes. So
You feel like you're
that's
a
pretty
little
much it.
more encouraged about the ride, or are you still really worried?
No, like I said, I like when Imagineers really do their research, and for them to be, huddled there for 2 years
Hmm.
and to invite people out to share their research, whether or not they're giving away too much information or not. I feel like that's a step in the right direction. Um, yeah, I feel a little more assured that this is going to be a good overlay, which I was already happy about it happening before. Um, I I'm always excited for a new, I guess you could say, dark ride for Disney parks, and
Yes.
I feel like this is going to be great. And when you say fireflies and the smell of beignets and all the detail that's going into it, where can we go wrong, right?
That's true. And dozens of new animatronics, and they're
Oh
state of the
yeah,
art animatronics. So, not just humanoid ones for Prince Naveen and his mother and
new
his little brother and
music.
Tiana, but also all those
Hmm.
critters that they're building from scratch. Each critter has a name and a musical
Oh,
instrument that they have made themselves out of discarded materials that make sounds. We actually got to see a museum display where that's what people did when they didn't have money is they made their own musical instruments out of stuff they had, boxes and old furniture and things like that. And that's kind of what the characters have done in their little like country bear jamboree-esque kind of environment. So I think that there are some potential new like Chubby from Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
oh
He's the
yeah.
breakout star of that ride. I think there's a going to be at least a character or two that looks so adorable that we'll all fall in love with. So at first I was super
Mhm.
excited when they announced the ride and we saw, Mama Odie's boat up there at the top of the mountain. I was so excited. Then I got a little less excited when they started talking about salt mines and missing ingredients. And now I have to say, back to being excited. So it's a roller coaster ride or it's a flume ride, Chloe.
Yeah.
Let's just hope that gets more exciting from here. But we'll keep our eyes open. We'll be vigilant. And if we hear good things, we'll let you know. If we hear bad things, we'll let you know because that's what we do here at MiceChat. But we appreciate you all. Please make sure that you're checking out our Friday live videos as we are live every Friday from the parks at 5 o'clock Pacific time. You can find that on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/micebook, or on YouTube at youtube.com/MiceChat. But either way, if you search MiceChat, you'll see the MiceChat pages on YouTube or Facebook, and you can follow us live every Friday at 5. So way to hear all the current news and see the parks at the same time. I'm getting ready to go on an adventure, so I'm going to try and convince Miss Chloe to maybe do some of those lives for us, maybe from some of the parks out there in Florida, while I'm off on another secret assignment that you all will get to hear about when it happens in June. Lots of things going on, Chloe. It's almost too much, but I miss your face, and I hope we'll do more
Oh,
of
I
these
miss you
videos soon.
too. Yeah, definitely. We have a lot to talk about, right? There's always something going on at the
Oh
parks.
my gosh, so much. Thank you all. We will be back with you again real soon, I promise. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.